Hey guys, Karenology here. Get ready because this story is pure chaos from start to finish. They came with clipboards and polite smiles. 4 people from the Homeowner Association, dressed like they were going to a board meeting, not stepping onto the cracked asphalt of what used to be a schoolyard. One of them, a tall woman in cream-colored slacks and oversized sunglasses, walked like she already owned the place. Her name was Karen Redfield. I'd recognize that tone anywhere. Crisp, condescending, and completely uninterested in what you had to say, unless your name came with a title and a donation. She pointed at the old flagpole, the one I'd repainted myself, and said, "That's coming down. It violates Article 14.2 on structural integrity and vertical signage." She didn't look at me when she said it, just barked it out like an order. That pole had been there since 1947. I'd spent a whole week sanding it down and sealing it. It wasn't just a pole. It was memory. But that wasn't the worst of it. What really set everything off, what brought the fire that couldn't be put out, was what they did to Tyler's display. Tyler Mason was 17, tall for his age, with that quiet, searching look kids have when they've had to grow up too fast. His father had been a sergeant in the Marine Corps, killed by an IED 2 years ago. Tyler didn't talk much, but the day we opened the community center, he brought in his dad's uniform, framed it himself, hung it in the hallway by the library with a little plaque he carved by hand. 3 days later, it was gone. They didn't just remove it. They burned it, called it unauthorized decor, said it had no historical context for the community. Karen herself signed the disposal report. When I confronted her, she said, "You can't let emotion override policy, Mr. Sloan." I don't remember the words I used in reply, only that I was shaking. And I don't shake easily. I've been a builder my whole life. Worked restoration projects from Virginia to Arizona. Seen entire churches rebuilt from ash and sweat. This old school, this place, it was supposed to be my last project. Not just mine, ours. A center for veterans and kids like Tyler where skills meant more than screens and hands did something real again. They wanted to tear that down too. See? The Homeowner Association was expanding. The Bright Haven Estates development had eaten up half the town already, and the old zoning lines blurred like coffee stains on a contract. Somehow, quietly, legally, they claimed our lot. Claimed it was under their jurisdiction now, and with that, they started issuing notices, violations for our workshop siding, fines for the garden beds, complaints about our music nights. One of their board members, Owen Taggart, even accused Raoul, our carpenter, deaf as a stone but twice as fast as most, of running an unlicensed business out of the tool shed. All of it documented. All of it stacked like bricks to build a case. We tried talking. Letters, meetings. I even invited them to the center. Showed them the kids sanding wood, veterans teaching welding, the wall of honor with names etched into cedar. Karen said it was a misuse of communal space, so I wrote a letter, not to them, to someone else. Thomas Baker, retired colonel, USMC, old friend. We hadn't spoken in over a decade, but some bonds don't rust. I told him everything. Didn't ask for help. Just needed someone to know. 3 days later, a dusty SUV pulled into the lot. The man who stepped out wore jeans, boots, and a battered Marine Corps cap. Thomas looked older, but his eyes hadn't aged a bit. Behind him came more. Not soldiers, not a militia. Just people. Quiet, watchful, capable. Former engineers, welders, communicators. Some walked with canes, some with scars. But they knew what this place was, and they weren't about to let it be erased. We didn't call it revenge. That's not the right word. But we built something in the weeks that followed. And the association? They had no idea what was coming. Not yet, but they would. The first move wasn't loud. It was quiet, like most good plans. Thomas stood next to me on the back porch of the center, watching the late afternoon light fade across the cracked basketball court. We didn't talk much. Never had to. He looked over the reports I'd gathered. The violation letters. The zoning maps. The HOA notices written in corporate legalese so thick it felt like trying to wade through molasses in winter boots. Looks like they papered the place up real good, he finally said, flipping a page with a leathery hand. But paper burns. The next day, Daniel showed up. Daniel Lowry was one of those tech guys who talked in riddles and drank more coffee than water. He used to run cyber ops for one of those three-letter agencies. The kind of guy who could find your high school book report in a government archive if he wanted. He'd aged into a wiry frame with a gray ponytail and the constant smell of solder. He set up shop in the old principal's office, put together what he called a digital footprint map. Basically, he tracked how Brighthaven's zoning acquisition spread like a slow cancer across the county. Turns out, it wasn't just us. 4 other community lots, including an old veterans house. Nuzzing site had been quietly scooped up, rezoned, and flagged for redevelopment. Thomas made calls. Aisha Randall, former Marine Sergeant and current storm of a woman, pulled together a list of veterans who'd been hit by HOA policies in neighboring counties. Gloria came back from Florida early, 73 and still swinging a hammer like she was building the Ark herself, and Raoul started carving new signage for the center. He didn't need words. He saw everything. And what he carved into cedar that week said more than a courtroom ever could. We didn't call it a resistance. It wasn't some flashy campaign with hashtags and bullhorns. We just got to work, quietly, efficiently. We gathered statements from neighbors, photos of burned debris, testimonies from kids whose after-school projects had been shut down for being non-regulation. Meanwhile, the Homeowner Association doubled down. Karen Redfield sent a cease and desist order, claiming we were operating a commercial enterprise on residential land. She attached photos of our donation box, called it unauthorized solicitation. Owen Taggart started showing up with a body cam and a clipboard, writing us up for things like noise pollution and vegetative encroachment. One afternoon, while I was cleaning paintbrushes out by the fence, I saw Tyler standing near the burned patch where his dad's uniform had been torched. He didn't say anything, just stared. I walked over, handed him an old photo, one I'd kept from my Navy days. A bunch of us, tired, sweaty, smiling like idiots with our arms around each other. Tyler looked at it like it was a foreign language. My dad used to talk about this, he said finally, being part of something. You still are, I told him. That night, we put the call out. Daniel got a stream going online. Nothing big, just a private veteran forum and a few community pages. We called it Memory Access. Showed what we were doing. Told our side. Within 48 hours, we had hundreds of messages. Some angry, some grateful, all of them real. And then came the video. Aisha had recorded Karen during one of her little surprise inspections. On tape, Karen clearly said, "It's just old fabric, sentimental trash. We're improving the neighborhood." It went viral. Not millions, but enough. Enough to draw attention. Enough to raise questions. Local news picked it up. A small column at first, then a full story. Karen called an emergency HOA meeting. We weren't invited, of course, but Owen slipped up and left a draft agenda in his open email. Daniel found it through a shared server. The last line read, "Possible injunction. Legal lockdown." They were scared. That's when we decided to take the next step. Not to fight them, to expose them, but it meant going deeper than we'd ever planned. And I wasn't sure everyone would make it through without something breaking along the way. The next morning, the parking lot was full before sunrise. No one spoke much. It was the kind of silence you get right before a storm breaks. Not tense, just heavy with purpose. Gloria brought a big coffee urn and some of her oatmeal bars wrapped in wax paper, like it was a church bake sale. Raoul laid out tools on an old cafeteria table, all sharpened and cleaned. Aisha walked the perimeter like a sergeant prepping for parade. She didn't need to say a word. People just moved when she looked at them. Tyler showed up with a notepad and a GoPro clipped to his chest. "Documentation," he said, quiet but clear. That boy had changed. Whatever fire the Homeowner Association thought they'd stamped out when they burned that uniform, they'd just moved it. Planted it deeper. Daniel handed me a printout. Lines of code and colored boxes I didn't understand. "They've got off-the-book accounts," he said, tapping a finger against a name. "Shells, LLCs, phony contracting costs. Karen's husband used to be a zoning clerk. There are signatures here from his tenure that reappear. Same shape, different names." "What are we looking at?" I asked. Fraud. RICO-level fraud. We knew going public would be a risk. You don't tug on a web this big without getting the spider's attention. But we'd already been bitten. So we filmed a video. Not flashy. Just Thomas standing in front of the burned garden bed, reading a letter. A letter from the mother of a fallen Marine whose photo had been removed from a memorial wall under Karen's aesthetic revision. He read every word like it weighed 100 pounds. The video hit harder than we expected. Within days, national veteran groups reposted it. Comments poured in. Not just from soldiers, but nurses, teachers, factory workers. People who'd been silenced by boards, fined into corners, made to feel like their history didn't count. "It's like this everywhere," one woman wrote. Someone finally said it. That's when the association made their first real mistake. They filed an injunction. Accused us of harassment, defamation, and incitement. Claimed we were staging a hostile takeover of community land. The language was absurd, but it meant we were being dragged into court. Fast. They wanted to drain us, not beat us. We didn't have lawyers, but we had Gloria. Turns out, before she was swinging hammers, she had a degree in legal administration and once worked in a courthouse. She and Daniel stayed up 3 nights straight building a case file. Aisha drove to the state archives and pulled zoning records by hand. Raul carved a scale map into plywood. 1 square foot for every foot Bright Haven had illegally annexed. The hearing was set for the end of the week. Meanwhile, Taggart started showing up more often, alone mostly, always recording. Once I caught him parked down the street from my house, just watching. Didn't even blink when I walked up to his window. Documenting ongoing violations, he muttered. Of what? I asked. He didn't answer, just drove off. Karen, on the other hand, vanished. No statements, no more meetings. Rumor was she was trying to distance herself legally, pin everything on the board. But her name was on too many documents. Her voice was in too many recordings. Her face was already a meme in the veteran forums. Still, something felt off. Too quiet. And then, the night before the hearing, the workshop was broken into. They didn't take anything, but they trashed it. Tables flipped. Tools scattered. The carved plaque Raul had made for Tyler's dad split in two. We stood there in the dark, flashlights sweeping across the mess. No police, no fingerprints, just a message. You don't belong here. But what they didn't understand, what they never understood, is that we already knew that feeling. We'd carried it before. In uniform, in hospitals, in warehouses where no one thanked you for 40 years on the line. And we weren't going to carry it again. Not here, not in silence, not anymore. The morning of the hearing, the sky looked like it had been bruised. All gray and swollen, like a storm was either coming or just passed. I couldn't tell. I pulled into the courthouse lot with Thomas in the passenger seat, Gloria and Aisha following close behind in Aisha's try. Raul in the back seat with his carved zoning map wrapped in a wool blanket. None of us spoke on the way there. Inside the building, it smelled like old paper and floor wax. The kind of place where bad decisions live a long time in filing cabinets, and no one dusts the truth off unless you force them. We sat in the hallway, facing the same doors that had probably seen more divorces and foreclosures than weddings or justice. Karen Redfield didn't show, but Owen Taggart did. Dressed in a navy suit that looked too tight across the shoulders, like it didn't belong to him. He had a lawyer in tow, some slick type from Richmond who shook hands like he was allergic to skin. The judge was a woman named Meredith Klein, mid-60s, sharp as frost and twice as cold. But fair. I'd read up on her. No patience for theatrics. She opened the case by reading through the injunction. The Homeowner Association claimed our center was engaging in unauthorized public events, storing hazardous materials, paint and tools, and encouraging militant gatherings. Daniel snorted when she said that. I kicked his boot gently under the table. Gloria presented our case first. With hands that had built houses and buried husbands, she laid out documents, timelines, maps, photos. She showed the spread of Bright Haven estates and how our property, legally grandfathered in and exempt, had been added to their rolls without a vote or due process. Then came Aisha. She didn't read. She spoke. Clear, calm, and exact. She described the burning of the uniform, the language used by Karen, and the pattern of intimidation. Every word landed like nails into wood. The courtroom, half full with observers by now, was still as winter. Taggart's lawyer tried to spin it, said we were trying to politicize grief, that the uniform had been left unattended in a communal area, and that our online posts were inciting threats against HOA board members. Thomas stood up then, didn't raise his voice, just handed the judge a single sheet of paper. It was a letter, one Karen herself had signed, explicitly authorizing the disposal of unauthorized memorial artifacts. Thomas let it sit there in silence until Judge Klein picked it up and read it. Then Raoul brought out the map, a full layout, carved into wood with hand-painted zones, dated parcels, and original signatures replicated from archived documents. He pointed wordlessly to the borderline and to the official HOA boundary that ended 2 blocks before our center. Judge Klein leaned forward, studied it for a long time. After lunch, she came back with a ruling. The Homeowner Association had overstepped. Grossly. The injunction was dismissed. The rezoning was declared invalid. The judge ordered a formal investigation into HOA practices in the region. Fines were paused. All citations against us revoked. It wasn't cheers. Wasn't celebration. Just a slow release. Like a knot that had lived in your back so long you forgot what breathing felt like. But it didn't last long, because when we got back to the center, we found the front gate chained shut. A laminated sign flapped in the breeze. Property sealed by Brighthaven Corporate. Entry pending civil review. Different sign do you want? Different name, same fight. Only now, it was bigger. And the people behind it wore suits we couldn't see and played a game we hadn't yet learned. But we would. That night, we lit lanterns in the yard, sat in lawn chairs, ate from paper plates. Tyler played a song on his phone, and Raoul whittled quietly under a porch light. It wasn't surrender, it was intermission. And tomorrow, we'd go deeper. By the next morning, the email started. Form letters mostly. Brighthaven Corporate Communications, expressing regret for the misunderstanding, while assuring us that legal proceedings are standard protocol in land use disputes. A whole lot of words that meant exactly nothing. They followed it up with silence. The kind that isn't empty, but loaded. We couldn't get anyone on the phone. No answer from the zoning board. No updates from the registrar's office. Even the county clerk, a woman I'd known for 20 years, suddenly claimed she couldn't comment on pending matters. That's when we knew we weren't just dealing with Karen and her clipboards anymore. This was money. The kind that moves beneath things. The kind that doesn't need to knock. It owns the door. Daniel dug deeper. From the room that used to be a janitor's closet, now filled with screens and server hum, he started tracing shell corporations. One led to another, then to another, until the trail stopped in a blind trust based out of Delaware. That's the firewall, he said. But there's a crack. It came in the form of an invoice. A routine permit fee accidentally logged into a public utility system. It listed an address, one we recognized. A Brighthaven property manager's vacation house, located just outside the county. Paid for by a consulting firm, supposedly dissolved 3 years ago. That was our thread. So we pulled it. Meanwhile, we couldn't get into the center. Raoul stood at the chained gate every morning at sunrise, carving small animals from scrap pine. Gloria started collecting written statements from parents whose kids were now wandering unsupervised in the afternoons. Aisha drove 3 counties over to talk to a land rights group that had dealt with something similar in 2011. They shared their records and a name: Gerald Barnes, real estate attorney, former lobbyist, current consultant for Brighthaven's regional operations, had once been sanctioned for coercive rezoning strategies. The charges were dropped, of course. Friends in the right places. We sent him a letter, not a threat, just a meeting request. He declined. So, Thomas showed up to his office, not with cameras or signs, but with a briefcase full of notarized affidavits and a box of burned wood from our center's vandalism. Barnes refused to speak on the record, but his assistant, a young woman named Delia, watched everything with a face like thunder behind glass. 2 days later, Delia emailed us. Anonymous server. 1 attachment. It was a memo. Internal, from Brighthaven's legal team, discussing potential liabilities in light of veteran-affiliated publicity, and the recommendation to expedite asset consolidation before external audits commence. They were running. Problem was, they were running with our land. And if we didn't stop them now, they'd bury it under concrete and call it progress. So we filed a formal injunction this time, backed by new counsel. A legal aid firm run by a former Marine named Sinclair, who'd seen our video and offered help pro bono. Filed under misappropriation, fraudulent zoning, and unlawful obstruction of community access. Brighthaven retaliated immediately. Counterclaims, media pressure, an op-ed in the local paper describing us as radicalized retirees weaponizing patriotism for political theater. It almost worked. Some of the town backed away. Donations slowed. One of our teenage volunteers got harassed outside the gas station. Raoul's shed was egged. And then Tyler did something none of us expected. He made a film, using old footage, bits of interviews, phone clips, and pieces from our memory access archive. He edited it in the school computer lab after hours. It was raw, honest. It didn't ask for sympathy. It demanded recognition. He called it Not Just a Uniform. Within 3 days, it had 70,000 views and 1 message from a congressional staffer. We saw the footage. Our office is interested. Can we talk? The war wasn't over, but for the first time since this began, I felt something crack through the fear. Hope. The call came on a Tuesday. Gray skies, still air. The kind of morning where the world feels like it's holding its breath. The voice on the other end introduced herself as Margaret Lane, Chief of Community Affairs for Congressman Ellis's office. She spoke with a practiced calm, like someone used to wildfires and keeping buckets ready. We're sending someone to your town, she said. Unofficially, to listen. We didn't ask for more. Didn't need names, just a time and a place. We chose the center, of course. Our center, still behind a chain and padlock. The front gate was closed, but the lawn was open. We set up folding chairs under the old elm tree. Raoul brought iced tea. Gloria made banana bread. It wasn't a press event. It was a conversation. The man who arrived wore a plain blue suit and scuffed shoes. Introduced himself only as David. Mid-30s, wire-rimmed glasses, eyes like a hawk's, calm but scanning. He didn't record, didn't take notes, just listened. For 3 hours, Thomas told him about the zoning fraud. Aisha told him about the harassment. Gloria about the legal inconsistencies. Raoul didn't speak, but showed him the map again. And Tyler gave him a copy of the film. David took it like it was something sacred. He left quietly, promised nothing. 2 days later, the gate was cut. No fanfare. No statement. Just silence and a broken chain on the ground. We opened the doors. The workshop smelled like dust and old pine, the way it always had. Nothing stolen. Nothing moved. It was like they'd wanted us to know. They could lock it, and they could unlock it. That power was theirs. But they misjudged something, because this time we weren't alone. The video had gained traction. Not just views, coverage. A segment on a national morning show. Articles from veteran journals. Local papers from 4 states away calling for interviews. And people started coming. Old Marines with their grandkids. Teachers. Steelworkers. 2 women from a Navajo community center who drove 12 hours just to drop off a box of hand-carved gifts and say, "We know this story." Brighthaven panicked. They filed for emergency arbitration. Claimed the film was slander, the support was orchestrated, and our center posed a reputational threat to their development strategy. Their lawyer called us a rogue civic militia. I laughed when I read that. Gloria didn't. They're baiting us, she said, trying to make us flinch. We didn't. Instead, we invited the town. All of it. We hosted a community day. No speeches, just booths, live carving from Raoul, welding demos from Thomas, kids painting tiles that would become part of a new mural we'd install on the back wall. Tyler ran a screening of his film every hour, projected on a canvas stretched between 2 ladders. By dusk, there were almost 200 people on the lawn. Even the mayor came. Quiet, cautious, but there. And in his silence, something shifted. The next morning, a letter arrived. Certified from the State Attorney General's office. An investigation was being opened into Brighthaven's land acquisitions. Records had been subpoenaed. The phrase used was systemic abuse of regulatory process. That same day, Karen Redfield was spotted at the courthouse. Her first public appearance in weeks. She looked thinner, tired, flanked by 2 new attorneys. She didn't speak to anyone, didn't look at anyone. Taggart, on the other hand, wasn't so careful. He showed up at the center that night. No clipboard, no body cam, just a flashlight and a scowl. Claimed he was checking on safety violations. Thomas met him at the gate. You're not welcome here, he said. This is still disputed property. Not tonight, it isn't. Taggart stepped forward. Just a little. Enough. Raoul appeared behind him, silent as fog. Aisha stepped out of the shadows near the bench. Gloria came from the porch. I joined them last. We didn't touch him, didn't threaten, just stood. He left, and this time, he didn't look back. It was a small moment, but it felt like a turning point. The center was open again, and we were ready for whatever came next. The first sign that things were truly shifting came in the form of silence. Not ours, but theirs. No more letters, no more notices. No Taggart skulking around with his flashlight. Even the Brighthaven website scrubbed the development name from their project listings. But we didn't mistake that for surrender. Silence, I'd learned over the years, is just another kind of strategy. So we kept moving. Daniel set up a community archive online. Every photo, every video, every zoning document we'd collected was now public. Aisha started hosting small night classes at the center. First aid, home repair, self-advocacy. Raul carved a new plaque and mounted it on the front door. It read, simply, "We remember." And Tyler? Tyler was becoming something else entirely. Not just a kid with grief anymore. He started filming everything. Interviews. Old-timers telling stories on the porch. Kids talking about what the center meant to them. He called it oral history. I called it legacy. Meanwhile, the investigation into Bright Haven deepened. Turns out our land wasn't the only one. Other communities, mostly low-income, mostly veteran-heavy, had experienced the same kinds of encroachments. The puzzle pieces started fitting together. Illegal deeds, forged signatures, ghost companies signing contracts. Bright Haven wasn't just dirty, they were soaked in it. And then came the leak, a folder of internal emails sent to several local news outlets anonymously. They included a list titled Strategic Reclamation Priorities. Our center was ranked number 3. Next to it, in parentheses, public sympathy risk, high. Proceed with stealth. It was the final match to the powder keg. That weekend, our town held a public forum. Not a city hall meeting, an open-air one in the school's old football field. They brought in chairs, speakers, a few tents. The mayor spoke first. He admitted the town had been too quiet, too cautious, promised transparency moving forward. Then they handed me the mic. I didn't plan a speech. I just looked at the people, our people, and told the truth. About what we'd built, about what had been taken, about what we refused to give up. I didn't use big words, just real ones. About service, memory, community. I ended with this. They tried to make us feel small, but we don't need to be loud to matter. We don't need to own buildings to belong somewhere. We just need to remember who we are. And stand still when someone tries to move the ground under us. They stood. All of them. Some crying, some cheering, some just standing. Like they understood something unspoken had passed between us all. And then came the lawsuit. Not from us. From the state. Charges of fraudulent rezoning, obstruction, corporate abuse. It named executives, attorneys, and yes, Karen Redfield and Owen Taggart. They were served in the same building they used to hold their meetings in. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Karen tried to run, filed for dismissal, claimed she was just a volunteer, but the paper trail was solid, and her voice was on too many recordings. Taggart, cornered, struck a deal, turned evidence. He spilled everything. The pressure from Bright Haven, the fake citations, the quiet bonuses, the silencing tactics. And with that, the whole rotten structure began to collapse. But it wasn't the end yet, because even after the charges, the center still wasn't fully safe. Developers circled like buzzards, waiting to see what would be left after the fire. So we took the next step. We filed to have the center recognized as a historical and cultural preservation site. We gathered signatures, documentation, even footage from Tyler's archive. And for the first time, the approval didn't stall, because this time, eyes were watching, big eyes, and the tide wasn't just turning, it was pulling. The day the preservation order came through, it was raining. Not the heavy kind, but a soft, steady drizzle. The kind that makes the world smell like earth and leaves and old wood. I was standing in the workshop, looking at the new shelving Raoul and I had finished the day before, when Aisha came in holding the envelope like it was something sacred. She didn't say anything, just handed it to me and smiled. I opened it with hands that had once built church roofs in Arizona, patched Navy decks in storms, and held my son when he came back from Iraq with eyes that didn't quite settle right. The letter was short, plain, legal, but what it meant was everything. Effective immediately. Our center, the land, the building, the history, was permanently protected as a community heritage site. No commercial development, no annexation, no homeowner association interference, no concrete poured where cedar once stood. The last chain had broken. We called everyone. No big announcements, no press. Just the people who had carried this thing with us. Folding chairs came out again. Gloria baked peach cobbler. Raoul lit candles along the walkway, each one next to a carving of a name. Veterans, volunteers, kids who had come through here and found their footing. Tyler read a poem. His voice cracked halfway through, but he kept going. When he finished, the whole lawn was quiet. Not because we were sad, but because the fight had made us more than we were. We hadn't just won. We had rebuilt something no one could tear down. The next morning, trucks rolled into Brighthaven's regional office. Boxes, computers, desks, all of it hauled out under the gray eyes of state agents. Karen Redfield's resignation was leaked. Taggart disappeared from public view. Charges were pending. Subpoenas were flying. The paper ran a front-page headline. HOA scandal sparks nationwide review. Other towns began to speak up. Stories poured in. Old men with dusty medals. Young mothers raising kids alone. Teachers pushed out for planting memorial gardens without permission. They were different, but they all said the same thing. They thought we wouldn't fight, but we did, and we still do. Months passed. Slowly, like life does when it isn't under siege. The center grew busier, new volunteers, more tools, new classes. Gloria started a veterans woodworking co-op. Daniel gave cybersecurity workshops to teenagers who'd never met someone who wore a hearing aid and could hack a traffic light. And one warm Sunday morning, Tyler hung a new sign above the front door. It was made of iron and oak. Etched into it were the words, "Not just a uniform." Beneath it, in smaller letters, "Founded on memory. Built by hands. Defended by all." People came and went. Some stayed, some moved on. But no one forgot. And me? I still get up early. Still drink my coffee on the back porch. Still check the siding on the east wall when it rains. But sometimes I catch myself smiling when I hear the kids laughing in the workshop, or when I see Tyler walking the perimeter like it's his now, because it is, because it's all of ours. And no matter how quiet the world gets, no matter how thick the concrete tries to pour over history, some things remember, some things remain, and some fights, the good ones, you win not just by standing, but by never sitting down again.